Welcome to Maine Concerns, where our news team gives you a closer look at the events that happened around Maine this week.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Cindy Campbell. Our focus today is on Bangor, peer support rehab programs, and a beautiful picture book that's calling attention to both. Sean Faircloth is the Executive Director of the Together Place on Union Street in Bangor and the photographer for Pandemic Strolls Bangor, One City in the Year of COVID. So the Together Place, Sean, is that blue building on Union Street with all the big paintings on the outside. But I think a lot of people don't know what you do there. Let's run down some of the things that you do at the Together Place, starting with a recovery center.
Correct. The Together Place is a peer-run recovery center, and it offers specific and kind of specialized services. So our primary offering is Certified Intentional Peer Support Specialist, which is a terribly long name. We end up calling it SIPS, but nobody else knows what that means. But basically what it means is a Certified Intentional Peer Support Specialist is someone who has special training, like most people by now have heard the term recovery coach, and it's somewhat similar to that, but they get more extensive training. They, by definition, have to be someone who themselves is in long-term recovery. So they've been through this experience themselves, and that's a requirement. And like I say, the training is more extensive, and it applies to two topics, or at least in some people's minds, two topics: mental health recovery and substance use recovery, although now substance use is defined as the DSM, so actually substance use is part of mental health diagnoses. But sometimes recovery coaches only work with substance use, and a lot of times, as you might expect, people who face substance use issues also have an underlying or co-occurring mental health diagnosis as well.
Right.
And also the SIPs, as we call them, they get continuing education training. So it's kind of a specialized version of a recovery coach. And Together Place also happens to be located in what is the highest overdose neighborhood in Bangor. And unfortunately, according to recent statistics we got from UMaine, actually, this city is the highest overdose death rate city in the state of Maine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You might think it might be someplace in southern Maine, and they certainly, in numbers, because the higher population, they have more deaths and so forth. But in terms of the rate compared to population, it's highest here. And, sometimes I mention people think about Stephen King's novel It, and a lot of times if you travel around the world, if they've heard of Bangor at all, it's Stephen King, and
Right.
It is the novel that they probably most know about because it was written set in Bangor. And in Stephen King's It, they talk about this neighborhood. Actually, the lead female fictional character, obviously, but he sets her growing up right here in this neighborhood. And Stephen King himself lived on Sanford Street in Bangor in this neighborhood for a while. So that novel was written 35 years ago, more than 35 years ago now. So he talks about the challenges of that neighborhood way back then, and they preceded that. So we are right in the epicenter and really are working to take on this combined issue. Unfortunately, Maine has also more significant mental health problems than the nation as a whole, and unfortunately, Maine is in the top 10 of overdose states of the union. So it's not, a lot of times I think in the old days people would say, well, that's some urban problem or something that happens in South Central LA or something. Well, actually, a lot of smaller states in rural America are seeing it not just equally, but even more so than other places, sadly.
Do you think, and kind of spitballing here, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but do you think part of the reason for those numbers being so high is the fact that Bangor is becoming known as a service center for homeless, that they can get a lot of the services that they need here?
Well, I think of Bangor, and I served previously as state senator and mayor. I think Bangor has some big city challenges and big city amenities, too. So in some ways, Bangor, because it serves such a huge geographic region, we have wonderful things. We have theater, and we have a whole range of wonderful amenities that maybe a lot of cities our size don't have. On the other hand, and I think we want to embrace the challenge, but it also means, like you're saying, that we serve a lot of folks, and a lot of folks, maybe they come for this or that service, and they end up staying in the Bangor region. But I think the correct approach is a compassionate approach. I'd like to see as much services as can be provided in the more rural parts of this vast geography that surrounds Bangor.
Right.
But the reality is that a lot of it does congregate here in this section, and a very high percentage of it is people who are, from this immediate area.
Right.
But either way, the challenge is here, and the way to address it is not stigma, it's not condemning people. The philosophy at Together Place Peer-Run Recovery Center is we have to use compassion, work with people, work with them on possible job opportunities, work with them on their recovery, and you can't do that well with job opportunities if you don't have at least a good foothold on your recovery. So
Right.
it's important.
Peer support is really important too, isn't it? I mean, anyone who's going through recovery really needs to have a tribe of people who are also going through it and helping to support them.
Exactly. I mean, that's what these certified intentional peer support specialists are all about. They get that more extensive training, but they also can look someone in the eye. And I highly respect, a clinical professional like a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and they have a very important value.
Right.
But there is a distinct value to someone saying, listen, I have experienced myself something similar to what you have experienced, and we can get there together. We can do this together. And we really need that as one of the most important tools in the toolbox, because this is obviously a national problem. Unfortunately, maybe more so even here, but it's a national problem, and we have to take it on as a society. And, when you're talking about mental health and substance use, the other aspect that's really true is a lot of folks are facing severe low income or even poverty in Maine and in this neighborhood in particular. So we're really trying to take this head on. You mentioned about the murals. We have these two wonderful murals. One mural faces the Y and depicts prominent Maine athletes, and the other mural faces the Historical Society and depicts prominent Maine historical and cultural figures. We've added to our recovery groups creative recovery groups. This is part of our philosophy here. So we have a creative writing contest, which your listeners are welcome to participate in. It's for anyone who lives in Maine who is in some form of recovery. We give out an award every year, and so creative expression can help people. And really the Pandemic Strolls photo book is kind of just a tribute to that, as are the murals, if you will, to kind of allowing people to express themselves in a creative way can sometimes help people with their recovery.
Now, can folks get more information about that creative writing contest on your website?
Yes, they can. We're actually going to be issuing in December our new contest. Each year we do a creative writing contest, and so anyone can participate, and if they do want to participate, they're welcome to call our number, 9412907, or, say that they are interested in the contest, and that's anyone and everyone. Just as long as you're in long-term recovery and you're a resident of the state of Maine, we actually give out cash prizes. That won't be till next summer, but we'll be putting out the rules here in the next couple of weeks, actually.
Okay, now you had mentioned employment. Together Place helps with employment as well, correct?
Right, so we work with folks like at the Career Center and also just in one-on-one sessions and group sessions. So we, for instance, have on Tuesdays at 1, we have folks who talk about personal finance and addressing those issues. Because, as I say, a lot of times the issues of poverty and mental health and substance use become intertwined in a way that's very difficult for some folks to escape or get a foothold into the future. So yes, we work both with Career Center folks, we work with folks in their discussion saying, okay, let's help you with resume writing, for example. Let's work together on where you would aspire to work. So that's a significant, we serve a lot of folks who are, in very vulnerable situations. We're quite near the shelter, obviously, just a block or two away. So we deal with some of the most vulnerable of the most vulnerable in society.
Now, your meetings and your groups right now, are they in person or are they virtual?
It's a combination.
Okay.
Obviously, the numbers have been even more daunting here as we move toward winter. But since, the original shutdown, we had a combination method where we would Zoom in, and a lot of people were more comfortable, understandably, Zooming in to our groups. And so we had, interestingly, in addition to, Bangor region people, we had somebody who Zoomed in from Nevada for some reason, said, I like your groups and I want to participate.
Wow.
And so they did. But we also have in-person, but we are very strict about following the rules. So, for example, our main floor, which easily could, in normal times, accommodate well over 100 people, now our max capacity that we allow is 20, and that includes staff. So we keep it quite limited. We keep people 6 feet apart, and we wear masks. And so we have groups going on. You can go to togetherplace.org and see there the groups that we offer each week. And we're not just limited to that. People can come for one-on-one. This is free. So you don't even need a main care card or something. You just come and say, or call and say, I'm struggling, whether it's a mental health or substance use issue, I'm struggling. And someone will talk to you one-on-one. But then you can go to togetherplace.org and see the regularly scheduled groups, which are, weekdays between the hours of 8 and 4, and people are always just walk right in, just say I'm in recovery, and that's it, and you're able to participate or Zoom in.
Okay. All right. So Together Place also deals with housing, right? Tell me about that program.
Right. So we administer, it's actually technically a separate corporation, but we administer some housing for people who have a mental health diagnosis to meet certain criteria, and only when we have openings. It's a fairly small number of units, but they're units here in the city of Bangor, and it's empowering because it's really governed by the residents. We do the administration for it, but it's their company, and they are really the governing body, so they vote kind of like a co-op on decision-making for their units, and it helps to provide a sense of empowerment for people who are in mental health / substance use recovery.
Okay. And what is the Second Street Diner?
So Second Street Diner, which has been, things have been slower, obviously, during the pandemic, but we offer, I think, last I knew, we were the only place in eastern Maine, anyway, that offers hot food for EBT. Because of our mental health exemption, we're able to do that. As some of your listeners may know, generally, like if you go to the Hannaford, you can't use EBT to buy the hot food under the lights, the heat lights.
Yeah, exactly.
Allow it. You can't use EBT at a restaurant generally. But because we provide these mental health services, we provide what is basically very low-cost hot food and, other snacks and whatnot at the Second Street Diner. Things have changed a bit for us during the pandemic because we're holding our groups, and in the past we could cram in as many people as we wanted, in the building. Now, we have to make sure we keep within our 20-person capacity for the main floor of our building, so our diner's still there and still operating, but our primary function is the recovery groups and the recovery one-on-ones and sessions.
Right. So obviously, Sean, to operate all of these programs, it takes some capital. And so you found a unique way to drum up some donations. Tell us about your book.
Well, right. So when there was a shutdown, for my exercise, when I was off work, I would just say, I got to get out of the house. And so I would just walk around, and especially in the early part of the pandemic, even the streets of Bangor tended to be fairly quiet. And I just snap photos just of what's life like these days. And then at the end of the summer, people started saying, via Facebook or whatever, that they liked the photos and were interested in what they saw. Even though the title mentions the pandemic, it's really more of just more Norman Rockwell than that. It's just sort of a day-to-day photographs of people in 2020 living their lives. And so it shows, anything from people outside with masks playing music, it shows people kind of helping each other, and it also shows just sort of the general tone of life so that you'll see, not just things that might relate to the pandemic, but beautiful homes, beautiful scenery, people smiling and enjoying life. So it's kind of a tribute to Bangor and the resilience of people in the Bangor area. It's really a book that celebrates the city of Bangor, but it also shows the difficulties. Obviously, this was a political year, people with strong feelings on many sides, and so I just would take pictures of whatever people were doing in their lives during that time. And Black Lives Matter, I took photographs of one of those events, but it just shows daily life. And it's interesting because I researched and looked around for photographs of Bangor. Quite a few people died so far. More people died in 1918 in Bangor from what was called the Spanish flu back then. Mm-hmm. But there's really, and I struggled with the library and other historical society, and they couldn't find photos, showing much from that time.
Right.
And so this is kind of a record, and really it's a record that shows a lot of positivity despite the strife and difficulties that this year has presented.
I'm also an amateur photographer, so I love this idea because pictures are so evocative, and I think this would be so great not only for us to look at, but something to hang on to for your kids and your grandkids when they're learning about 2020 and the pandemic in school. Then you have this book that says, well, this is what Bangor looked like. These are some of the things that were going on, and some of it was good and some of it was not so good.
Well, it's interesting. I try to show an honest picture, so we show, part of the neighborhoods where there's significant overdose issues, which is something we need to take on. And I also show, beautiful pictures, people who are looking attractive and wonderfully enjoying life and, beautiful buildings and so forth, but I also try to make it an honest picture of the challenges we face. it's interesting, the book's only been out for a few days now, but it's interesting the number, or types, I should say, of people who have an interest. Like, for instance, one woman said to me, I'm buying this right away because I think it was her sister lives in Seattle, and she misses Maine and says, I'm going to send this, just as a snapshot of Bangor. Or also there's people who retired elsewhere, moved away, and they'll say, I want it, even though I don't live in Bangor anymore. I like it as, that's where I grew up, and I want to see some photos of daily life in Bangor. And then, like you say, another aspect that I think is sort of more long-term is it just saying, 1918, if most of us, myself included, if, I was on Jeopardy and somebody said, what was the big thing in 1918, I might think of, World War I or something, Most people in modern times, until recently, didn't think of the 1918 pandemic, even though it killed more people than did World War I in terms of Americans. And so this is just sort of a record of, all right, what was that like? Because 10, 15 years from now, it may seem like a vague and forgotten thing. Who knows?
Right.
And so your niece, your nephew, it's just something that might save for that future time when this seems like a long-ago event. And I hope it is in the rearview mirror and not too long.
Right.
But another thing that sort of pulls my heartstrings about it is that, yes, it has been very difficult. Yes, it has been very challenging, and sadly so many have died. But also there's just a lot of people going about helping each other, enjoying life, playing music, celebrating life, despite all the troubles.
Right. Exactly. So how do folks get the book?
Well, we are selling it in some of the downtown stores. I hesitate to name because I wouldn't want to miss one. But we are selling it in downtown shops. And also, most conveniently, togetherplace.org. You can click a link. And we're offering a couple ways to get it. $20, which is fairly inexpensive for a gift for family or friends. It's over 100 photographs of our city, and all taken, by the way, within the city limits.
Okay.
Strictly within the city limits of Bangor. Another method that we encourage is giving to the organization Together Place is doing monthly giving. So say instead of doing $20 right now, you say, I'll give $10 a month to help out this organization. That's not too much. I mean, that's a cup of coffee, maybe 1.5 cups of coffee, depending on where you buy it.
Right.
But then we give you a photo book for $10 a month, and we do it for each $5 increments. So say you do 15, you get 2 photo books. If you do 15 a month, or 20, you get 3 photo groups. And maybe you have a business in Bangor or elsewhere, and you just have it as a coffee table book for your business reception room, or a coffee table book for your own home, or for a friend's home, or a friend who likes photography. I mean, I'm not claiming it's not professional photography. It's more like street photography, slice of life photography.
Right.
What's it like to live here during this year?
Sean is also working with a group interested in neighborhood improvements in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Street sections of Bangor. Anyone interested in helping out can contact him through the Together Place. I'm Cindy Campbell. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and stay healthy.
Join us again next weekend for Main Concerns with your Townsquare Media News team.